For thousands of years, the civilizations of man have grappled with the prospect of immortality, each in its own way. None has left its mark more spectacularly than one of the very first, ancient Egypt. Starting 5,000 years ago, the Egyptian people turned their singular genius to the pursuit of life after death, leaving a legacy of riddles that remain unanswered. But in the desert, tantalizing clues are bringing us face to face with the mysterious pyramid builders for the first time. And in distant laboratories, scientists are going to extraordinary lengths to understand the Egyptian way of death. As never before, modern science is breathing new life into the secrets of the pharaohs. "45 centuries ago, one of the most extraordinary feats of human history rose out of the Egyptian desert. The 3 royal tombs of the pharaohs, with more than 6 million limestone blocks, took just 70 years to build. Without modern technology, workers lifted blocks weighing an average of 2.5 tons each and put them in place at a rate of 1 about every 2 minutes. The apparent impossibility of the task has led some to speculate that the Egyptians possessed some mystical knowledge long since lost, or even had help from aliens. But now the sands of the Giza Plateau are yielding startling new clues to the ancient puzzle of who built the pyramids and how.
200 years of digging have produced pyramids, tombs, temples, statues, nice inscriptions, and relief scenes, but where were all the people?
Mark Lehner is professor of Egyptian archaeology at the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute. His work has helped shift the focus of study here from monuments to men.
For the first time, we're excavating to shed some light on the lives of the people, as opposed to just how the elite and the king that they served, how they were buried.
Recent discoveries by Lehner and others have turned the popular understanding of pyramid building on its head. For centuries, the pyramid builders were thought to be slaves. Hollywood fed the myth of a captive labor force cringing under the whip. But one day in 1990, a remarkable discovery shattered that myth forever. A new era in the study of the ancient Egyptians began with a tourist riding a horse. A hoof plunged through the vaulted roof of a tomb that was sealed in the time of the pharaohs. Inside was a glimpse of eternity. The vault was coated with richly colored plaster, which began to disintegrate the moment it was exposed to the desert air. But for a brief time, it shone as beautifully as the tomb of a king. But the man buried here was not a king or even a nobleman. He was a worker. According to Dr. Zahi Hawass, Director General of the Giza Plateau, The design and construction of this tomb suggests that the man inside was no slave.
Because of the size of his tomb, because of the unique shape of the vaulted ceiling, and also because it was cased inside with plaster, then I believe this is the man who was in charge of the whole administration of the workmen. This is the man who wanted to be sure that all these people live in a good living, and they go early in the morning to work, and they come by in the sunset, and they live in the village, and at the same time when they die, there is a tomb for everyone.
In the months following the discovery of the vaulted tomb, Dr. Hawass and his crews unearthed more than 250 additional graves in the same area. They had found an entire cemetery for workers. The foreman's vaulted tomb is surrounded by the graves of his honored staff. Like the tombs of the pharaohs and noblemen, the workers' graves were probably arranged according to their status. Dr. Hawass found that some tombs displayed hieroglyphic job titles, further proof that the ancient builders of Giza were highly regarded craftsmen.
We found here 3 false doors. Above each one, we found painted stela. We found in the titles of those people the hieroglyphic inscriptions saying that Khirb Yerius means director of building tombs, and Sahaj Yerius means inspector of building tombs.
During excavation, archaeologists made another discovery that helped confirm the workers' status. Like the kings, the builders saw to it that pieces of art accompanied them in eternity. Detailed engravings, hieroglyphics, and small statues offered a glimpse of how the ancient workers actually looked. Hawass and his crew began to see a more and more vivid portrait of the builders, but nothing prepared them for what they would find next. At last, in the shadow of the pyramids, modern workers come face to face with their ancient predecessors. Forensic study of the remains tells a tale of suffering and sacrifice, of labor so grueling it was literally backbreaking.
In the study of the bones that we found, most of the men that has been found in the cemetery, they had stress on their back, on the bones of the back, mean that those people were involved in really moving stones or working in the pyramids or working in the tombs. Archaeology now is not like what you see in King Tut and find gold, and gold in King Tut never give us any idea about the people and about how they lived and about anything. But this cemetery is working with the dirt and the sand. Then each piece of sand, each piece of stone, each piece of pottery reconstruct the Egyptian history. It gives us information about those people.
Today, life on the Giza Plateau still moves to the ancient rhythms of the desert. Modern Egyptians work here now, slowly unveiling the lives of their ancestors.
Mohammed Morsi. Ali Camels. Road.
A few dozen men report for work at this site today, but during the pyramid construction, there were tens of thousands. Mark Lehner knew that a huge workforce would have required a city to support it. But where was the evidence of this long-abandoned metropolis? The first glimpse of it came when excavators began to uncover a bakery.
It's as though everywhere we open up a hole in the desert, we find massive evidence of bread baking. And we're talking about thousands and thousands and thousands of loaves. Where you have so much bread, the beer can't be far away, and where you have bread and beer, you have to have people. So it says that there are a lot of consumers out here.
Lehner and his team found huge vats for mixing batter and hundreds of bread molds.
We apologize to this pot that's been here for 5,000 years, intact. But there's no way we can take it out whole.
The more the archaeologists revealed, the more familiar the bakery became. They had seen its blueprint before. For years, Egyptologists have relied on the tomb of Ti in nearby Saqqara for details about daily life in the time of the pharaohs. Exquisite murals depict a broad range of ancient activities. The illustrations show how the Egyptians brewed beer and how they baked bread in a production line capable of feeding thousands. It matched Lehner's bakery exactly.
The beautiful thing about our results here is that the tomb walls inform what we're finding. You can go to this almost like a Sears catalog, like I say, and say, oh yeah, this is what we've got. It's a nice kind of merger of text, picture, and archaeological remains.
One fragment at a time, the archaeologists pieced together the layout of the ancient construction site. The desert jealously hides most of the evidence, but some clues are right out in the open, just waiting to be recognized for what they really mean. For years, Dr. Lehner drove through this passageway every day without giving it much thought. But when digging revealed that most of the structure was buried in sand, Lehner reconsidered its significance. What appeared to be only a 12-foot ledge was actually a gigantic wall that once towered 30 feet above the desert.
Now you don't build a 26-foot high gateway so men can go to work every day. This is a border, and this is the entrance to something really powerful. And what's really powerful are the pyramids, the tombs, and the temples, the tombs of the elite. And we think that the wall defines a border between all of that, the sacred, the stone, and everything here to the south, which is mud, stone rubble, and the secular support for everything north of the wall. And more I'm convinced this was in fact downtown Egypt during the time the pyramids were built.
Lehner thinks they might soon find a grand palace, even a royal residence on the downtown side of the wall. Through the huge gateway lay a harbor, the center of activity for the entire plateau.
In a harbor, they're certainly unloading the stone, they're unloading the people that they're bringing from the provinces for labor, but they're also unloading all the goods and commodities that came from all those new farms and ranches and cities, towns that were established for feeding the pyramid complex. For the first time, they were gathering people together, not in terms of hundreds, but suddenly in terms of thousands or tens of thousands.
To the edge of the desert, these masses came to make burial tombs for their kings, skyscrapers that would dwarf anything yet built by man. The building techniques were ingenious, but mysterious even today. How did workers lift these huge stones 40 stories high? Many scholars believe they used a giant ramp that spiraled up the sides of the unfinished pyramid to move the blocks to the top.
We would have seen hundreds, if not thousands of men, organized probably into teams of 10 or 20, pulling 2.5-ton blocks on large wooden sleds up the long ramp. There would have been a cacophony of sounds. You would have heard the clink-a-chink of stonemasons cutting the stones, tool sharpeners sharpening the copper chisels, and probably the chanting of thousands of men. They had to be doing this in a real rhythm if they put one block in place every 2.5 minutes.
Even as a picture of the ancient construction site emerges, another important mystery remains. Where did all this limestone, more than 15 million tons, come from? For centuries, a popular myth held that the stone came from a faraway quarry. But Dr. Lehner suspected there had to be a much closer source. For insights, he looked to a modern quarry, where limestone cutting goes on pretty much as it did in 2500 BC. Quarrymen dig long channels as a first step in breaking out giant limestone blocks. If channel marks like these could be found near the pyramids, they'd pinpoint a closer source of stone. Back at Giza, just 300 yards from the base of the largest pyramid, Lehner found what he was looking for: the telltale shape of a channel.
You can actually see the quarryman's pick mark in vertical striations coming down. And he was in here probably alone with lots of dust and chips flying all over the place with his pick, hacking his way through this giant rectangle of limestone bedrock.
Finally, Dr. Lehner had some proof. The stone came from right here, a quarry within sight of the Great Pyramids.
And you can see one edge of the quarry over there, the rock edge, just showing above these massive piles of debris. And if you draw a circle with your eye around the horizon and come over to this sheer rock face, that's the entire outline of the Khufu quarry. The amount of stone missing equals the amount of stone in the pyramid of Khufu, and the sides of the quarry line up with the Khufu pyramid.
Generations missed the quarry because it was filled in with strange debris. Lehner believes this rubble is all that's left of the pyramid construction ramps. When their work was finished, the builders tore down the ramps and dumped the remains here in the quarry.
We're looking at what the pyramid ramps were built out of just piles and piles of this limestone dust, and then they put up a retaining wall of mud and clay. And this stuff as a whole, is extremely solid. But when you want to take it apart, it really comes apart nicely with a pick and into its constituent parts. So this is essentially what the pyramid ramps must have been built out of, because this is what's here. Tons, millions of tons of this stuff.
Even as we solve the mysteries of how the tombs of the three pharaohs were constructed, scientists and laymen alike are still in awe of the scope of this ancient undertaking. Mark Lehner's discoveries here may help put to rest some of the more far-fetched theories.
It's, for me, much more mysterious and intriguing that the culture ruled by Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure built these, rather than some cop-out, which is what, the extraterrestrial option is. It's a cop-out. Well, we don't know how they did it. It was built by somebody else. First of all, it's sort of colonialist to say that somebody else, some other civilization that's missing, built them. But also, I think it really doesn't tap the human mystery of how they were built with so much suffering, with so much dedication, by the people that we know lived here, by the people in the tombs that were buried around here, by the people who were making bread down in our bakery.
As the Great Pyramid of Khufu rose out of the desert, nearing completion, a handful of ancient Egypt's finest craftsmen went to work on another gift to the pharaoh. For thousands of years, pilgrims came here to gaze up at the achievements of the pyramid builders, unaware that buried treasure lay under their feet. In 1954, an underground vault was discovered beneath these capstones near the pyramid's southern base. Inside the vault, explorers found the remains of a boat, a very big boat. Farouk Elbaz remembers the stir the find caused.
The news of the day said that we had found a ship that's kind of a funerary boat. When they removed the pharaoh westward, sailing westward with the sun, so that he'd be buried in this place. And a lot of people expected, now they're going to find his body, the mummy, because the Khufu's mummy had never been found.
Tuhami Mahmoud Ali was foreman of the work crew in charge of the excavation.
أول حجر.
وكان شعورك إيه ساعتها؟
كنت فرحان عشان وجدنا مركب مش في العالم.
I was delighted because we had found a ship, and the likes of which didn't exist anywhere in the world.
Tuhami was among the first men to enter the vault in nearly 50 centuries. But instead of the pharaoh's mummy, they found a completely disassembled ship. 1,224 pieces of polished cedar, arranged, in the words of one observer, like parts of a toy model. It took 13 years of painstaking labor to put the boat back together. The old shipbuilding techniques, like hand-tying planks to the rails, were scrupulously followed. Naval historians say the boat is an engineering feat in wood, as impressive in its own way as the pyramids are in stone. But even as the vessel took shape, experts disagreed about how it had originally been used. Some said it was simply a funeral barge. Others believed it was a ship for the pharaoh in his afterlife. Hieroglyphs from the nearby pyramid of Unas suggest that a pharaoh was expected to sail two boats, one during the day and one at night, as he followed the sun throughout eternity. Other reliefs, like these on the walls of the tomb of Ti, provide documentary evidence of the importance of boat traffic on the River Nile, but shed little further light on the debate, except to show us how the ancient boats were made. But whatever its use, the 142-foot vessel must have made quite an impression, then as it does today. It is one of the oldest ships in the world. Housed in its own museum, Khufu's boat attracts some 200,000 visitors a year.
These two for the anchor. The anchor.
Ouais.
And the big one to go to push it away
Ah oui, c'est
from the bank.
Ouais, ouais. Comment on appelle
But
ça?
this is small cabin for the captain.
Oui.
And this the big cabin for the mummy of Cheops.
Ouais.
This is all cedar wood.
34 years later, scientists prepared to examine the contents of a second underground chamber, discovered a stone's throw away from the first. But this time around, they would not excavate it. Dr. Elbaz, director of Boston University's Center for Remote Sensing, and a team of scientists sponsored by the National Geographic Society, began the operation with ground-penetrating radar, which provided a rough map of shapes below the surface.
Is the only real change.
This space-age approach has helped solve one of archaeology's thorniest problems: how to explore a site without destroying it. The only digging involved would be scraping away a few feet of loose earth from one of the enormous capstones covering the pit.
Archaeology is no longer a grave robbing activity or a destruction, a way of destroying things until you get the artifacts. It's not because the site itself might be an artifact, to keep it intact the way the ancients had left it. So this is really getting a way of departing from the archaeology the way it was, and we are just opening a whole new way that might apply in many other fields.
The key to the plan: drilling a small hole through the 6-foot thick capstone into the vault while still keeping it airtight. When the first chamber had been opened in 1954, the air inside was still heavy with the smell of cedar. So there was still a chance the air in this vault too had been trapped there for over 46 centuries, an invaluable scientific find. Bob Moores of Black & Decker developed a sophisticated airlock that would make sure new and old air wouldn't mingle. A system of O-rings and backup seals would be anchored to the rock. The drill would move through the limestone at the rate of about 4 inches an hour, with frequent pauses to remove dust and debris. Moore's unique design would then allow the hole to remain airtight when other instruments were inserted. Inside the vault, air samples would be collected and tested for traces of modern air pollutants. Finding none might explain why the first ship was so well preserved.
The rotary portion is turned.
Peter Tons of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration would supervise the sampling procedures.
The boat in the adjacent pit to this one was extremely well preserved for 4,600 years. And from what I've heard, it has deteriorated more in the past 20 years than in the previous 4,600. So the